Peter and Katniss, they're the main characters in the very popular Hunger Games trilogy. They're fellow competitors in the games. Peter is a baker's son, and he literally gives life to others, notably Katniss, with his gift of bread. As a young child, he risked his own safety to give Katniss the bread that kept her and her family alive when they were starving. Throughout the whole series, Peter evokes the images of the bread of life, making bread and sharing it and sustaining the people around him. At one point, with Katniss emotionally dead, Peter shows up, bearing a warm loaf of bread, and Katniss slowly comes back to life. You see, she is struggling to survive in the post-apocalyptic world of Panem. It's a world that's permeated with pervasive evil. It's a world where children are forced to fight to their deaths for the sport of their elders. The rulers of Panem desperately try to keep their citizens separate and disconnected from each other. And originally, Katniss buys into this, but she slowly realizes that people are stronger when they're together. With Peter's sharing of his bread, she begins to realize that they survive so much better as a team. His gift of bread helps her to understand that people need to be connected to each other. Bread and community. The themes of Hunger Games are also the themes of what we celebrate this weekend of Corpus Christi. We are called together as a community, nourished by bread and wine that's become the body and blood of Christ, and we are challenged to do this in memory of me. As we are a community nourished by this bread, each one of us is called to go forth from here to nourish one another, to take care of each other, to be present for each other. The feast we celebrate this weekend reminds us we cannot make it as isolated individuals, cut off from one another's joys and sorrows. There was a very interesting article in the New York Times a few weeks ago by Ross Duthow entitled, "The Age of Individualism." He has a great line in there. And what he wrote was, "Only pot, selfies, and Facebook will abide, and the greatest of these will probably be Facebook." The article analyzes a new Pew Research project about individualism and our tendency to disconnect from one another. He wrote this, he said, "In the future, it seems there will be only one ism, individualism, and its rule will never end. As for religion, it shall decline. As for marriage, it shall be postponed. As for ideologies, they shall be rejected. As for patriotism, it shall be abandoned. As for strangers, they shall be distrusted. Only pot, selfies, and Facebook will abide, and the greatest of these will probably be Facebook." That's quite a line. Pot, selfies, and Facebook. All very much in the news these days. But this new individualism is directly in contrast to what we read in the scriptures this weekend. The Israelite people were brought out of the land of Egypt as a community of people concerned about each other's welfare. And Paul tells us that though we are many, we are one. The age of individualism is in direct contrast to the challenge of this weekend's celebration. We are challenged to be the body of Christ. Do this in memory of me is not a challenge to go it alone. The new Pew survey that Ross Douthat was talking about is the latest dispatch from the land of young adulthood and describes a generation that's socially liberal on issues like immigration and marijuana and same-sex marriage. They are proudly independent of either political party, less likely to be married and religious than earlier generations, less likely to identify as patriotic, less likely by a striking margin to say that one's fellow human beings can be trusted. And one of the interesting trends that Ross points out that contributes to this age of individualism is that many people today are looking and searching for community online, not wanting to be physically connected to one another here in church or in groups or in any clubs. In direct contrast of what the challenge of this Feast of Corpus Christi is all about. In many ways, our technology, wonderful as it is, can certainly wrench us away from connection with our neighbors. And when we allow it to do this, we lose extremely life-giving experiences, like walking our neighborhood, hosting dinner parties, volunteering at community gardens, sharing a table at a soup kitchen, playing with children, gardening, sports, games, worshiping together in a church like this. We can miss a lot when we allow ourselves to be consumed by our computers, our smartphones, and our iPads. The first reading tells us how the Israelites were enslaved in the desert. We, as this generation, may need to ask ourselves, what enslaves us? Are we allowing our technology to cut us off from each other, to keep us from coming together, to be bread for one another, to be nourished at the table of the Lord, and then to nourish one another? It's very interesting. A Time Incorporated survey tells us that half of Americans say that they prefer to communicate digitally rather than talk in person. And back in 2012, Eric Schmidt, the chairman of Google, was asked to give the commencement address at Boston University. And he had a very interesting challenge for the graduates. He challenged them to get offline for 1 hour a day. Just 1 hour a day, he said, to get offline. He said, engage with the world around you. Feel and taste and smell and hug what's there right in front of you, not what's a click away. Life, he said, is not lived in the glow of a monitor. Life is about who you love, how you live. It's about who you travel through the world with, your family, your collaborators, your friends. Life is a social experience, and the best aspects of that experience are not lonely ones. They are spent in the company of others. And his last line was very interesting. He said, it's not about your friend count. It's about the friends you count on. So as we celebrate this Feast of Corpus Christi, as we call ourselves the body of Christ, perhaps each one of us needs to ask ourselves if we are using our technology in unhealthy ways at times that interfere in our relationships, in our family life, in marital love. Are we isolating ourselves and moving away from being part of nourishing communities, sharing in the joys and sorrows of one another? Does our technology at times prevent us from being the body of Christ, where we are nourished with the Eucharist and we become Eucharist for each other in our homes, our families, your marriages, and our relationships? Peter's gift of bread convinced Katniss that she could not go it alone. Her strength and ability to fight the evil of Panem involved the whole community. That is the challenge of Corpus Christi. Each one of us, we are all the body of Christ.